Hey guys, I am Glenn.
Hello, I am Christine Giramo.
Hey guys, I'm Kyle.
Good day, everyone. I am Grace Garcia.
And we are Group 3.
Today's discussion will be focusing on the topic assigned to us, which is about identification tests. This 10-minute discussion will help you get informed about the basics and essentials in constructing a good and reliable identification type of test. This video is divided into 4 parts, namely the objective, the introduction, the body which includes the guidelines and tips, and the summary. To start, we will be giving you a short introduction about the said type of test. Here's my groupmate Clean for the introduction.
Before that, the following are the objectives for today's discussion. First, to be able to define and explain what an identification test is. Second, to be able to understand the advantages and disadvantages of identification tests. Third, to be able to learn the basis and basics in preparing an identification test. And lastly, to be able to create an identification test following the given guidelines. And now for the introduction. Assessing the learning of students after class is significant for a teacher to perform in order to help them know the progress that their students have made, assess whether the goals and objectives are achieved, evaluate if there is learning that took place, and modify their teaching methods to recoup if the results of assessment was a fail. One of the common assessment and evaluation instruments used is the identification type of tests.
For more than 10 years of taking exams, we always notice that this type of tests are always present. It has a blank provided, and sometimes it asks you to complete the sentence. And we cannot deny the fact that this type of test is quite challenging. It starts with letter I and ends with letter N. You're correct, because it is the identification test. So what is identification test? So identification test is an objective type of test in a form of completion test that is defined, described, explained, or indicated by a picture, diagram, or a concrete object, and the term referred to is supplied by the students. Requires the examinees to identify and provide what is being asked in a given statement. In the case of this type of test, options are not supplied by the examiner. So, options are not available in this type of test. As stated earlier, it is an objective type of test. Thus, it needs to be scored objectively. This is one of the most challenging yet efficient type of examination since it initiates the recall of the students to the key facts and terms of the certain topic.
And I will be sharing to you or reporting to you the advantages and disadvantages of a identification test. As a future educator or as a teacher, we should know how to give an identification test and know the advantages and disadvantages of it so that we can perform it correctly and accurately to the students. So I will give you at least 2 of the advantages and disadvantages. Okay, so let's start. First advantage is it is easy to construct. Identification test is very easy to make. We don't need high-powered technology or a laptop or a gadget or a device or an app so that we can make an identification test. All we need is a ball pen and a paper and the learnings from the lessons that we. The second advantage is it is very easy to grade. As an educator or a teacher, it will be important if the assessment will be very easy to grade because there are tons of children or there are tons of paper for the students that we need to check. So, identification test will be a great type of test that will be easy to grade on because we now have a standard for grading because an item has only one answer. so we would know if it is correct or not immediately. Now, I will give to you 2 disadvantages. Okay, so identification test has also disadvantages. One that I can give you is it only examines the remote learnings that we had. Like, we will only guess the answer. It comes to identification test. When we are having a hard time, as a student, I know when we are having a hard time, we would guess the answer and take a hint from the question. So in that case, we will not know, as a future educator, we will not know that the children or the student really understand the lesson for if his or her answer is pure guessing. The second for the disadvantages is it creates an opportunity for cheating. Yes, of course. Because in identification test, for example, a case scenario, when the student has already done the exam, it will be very easy for him or her to pass the answer to the next class for his or her friend. Because in identification test, it is very easy to memorize when the answers are, for example, objects, flowers, astronomy. It is very easy to memorize and chat it on the messenger and or wrote it on the paper and pass it around. So it creates an opportunity for cheating.
Hey guys, I'm Kyle, and I'm going to discuss with you the third part of our topic, which is about the guidelines in creating an identification test. A good test must be constructed with a clear purpose and must meet the standards to obtain the purpose of the assessment. The test should help the students in their recall and must not be constructed difficultly that it might lead them to confusion. The following slides contain the guidelines, tips, and suggestions in the construction of the identification type of test. Let's start with the guidelines. Number 1. Give the student a reasonable basis for the responses desired. Make sure that the question will align with the topics they have studied. Avoid making indefinite statements. You should guide the students to arrive at the correct answer and not with a similar yet deceiving answer. For example, Marie Curie was born in blank. The question will confuse the students as to the correct answer, like the exact setting in which the person was born. Instead, rewrite the question into, the birthplace of Marie Curie is at blank. Avoid over-mutilated statements or statements that are structured incorrectly. You need to make sure that you let your students guess correct and relevant keywords in the questions and not with uncommon or unfamiliar words in the entire statement. Number 2. Avoid giving the student unwarranted clues to the desired response. As I've mentioned earlier, you only need to direct the students in getting to the correct answers by selecting appropriate terminologies to remove or lift. Do not remove all the important terms. Avoid lifting statements directly from the book. Make sure that you weigh the importance of the statement before creating a test to help them in their recall. Omit only words or phrases rather than trivial details. Whenever possible, avoid a or an immediately before a blank. These words may give a clue of whether a response starts with a consonant or a vowel. Do not indicate the expected answer by varying the length of blanks or by using a dot for each letter in the correct word. Guard against the possibility that one item or part of the test may suggest the correct response to another item. So make sure that you carefully construct and pick terms to be guessed. Avoid giving grammatical clues to the answer expected. For example, the proponent of the first chemical test is blank. This might leave the students hanging as there are various chemical tests used in the field. Instead, rewrite it to, the biosign test was prepared by blank to make it more clear and accurate. Number 3. Arrange the test to facilitate scoring. The scoring depends on the number of blanks in the given item. The scoring also depends upon your choice. You may base it on the difficulty of the terminology for the blank. Allow 1 point for each blank correctly filled. Avoid fractional credits or an equal weighing of items in a test. Select the items to which only one correct response is possible. Arrange the items as far as possible so that the students' responses are in a column at the right of the sentences. The scoring is more rapid if the blanks are numbered and the student is directed to write his response in the appropriate numbered blanks. Always remember to always prepare a key for scoring by writing a copy of the test all acceptable answers. For example, for items 1 and 2, an oxygenated blood from the veins is received by the blank of the heart, while the oxygenated blood from the heart is ejected into the arteries by the blank of the heart. In this case, the item has 2 correct points for 2 missing answers. Number 3. The blank acts as the heart's pacemaker. This one scores 1 point as it requires 1 answer on the blank.
Moving on, in the identification test, there are also do's and don'ts. So there are 2, the short answers and the fill in the blanks. So there are many do's and don'ts, but we will not elaborate all of them, we'll just pick one. In the short answer, do, I picked that we use specific questions because in making an identification test and there are short answers, we need to be directly on point because many unnecessary words may cause confusion to the students and lead to wrong answers. And of course, the don'ts are do not use long sentences and complex words in making identification tests with short answers because, as I said earlier, it will cause confusion and ambiguity, and those confusion will lead to the students unable to answer the question or unable to understand the question.
So we have these are suggestions in making identification tests. So first is we have minimize questions that call for sheer memory work unless the answer has important analytical significance. So in the case that if the question has a tendency to ask for facts that call for memorizing names, dates, and places, this should be minimized, as should be used only when the same has some important analytical significance.
Now for the summary. Identification type of test is a sort of objective test in the form of a completion test that stimulates the examinees to identify and provide what is asked in the given statement. Usually, just brief responses are required. There are 2 types of short answers, namely the question or enumeration and completion or fill in the blanks. Identification test is by far one of the difficult yet effective form of test since it challenges students to recall essential facts and terminology from a certain topic. Before incorporating this type of test, it is crucial to know its disadvantages and advantages to understand how it will most likely impact students' studying methods. Also, it is important to take note that in creating identification tests that is effective and efficient and is aligned to the objectives, it should be constructed following the guidelines strictly. And that wraps up the entire discussion of our topic. I hope this video helped you by acquiring insights about the type of test when you plan to create one in the future.
Thanks for listening.